Water, please, give me water. I was in the middle of watering the crops. Suddenly, a frail yet desperate voice called out from the field. A woman I didn't recognize had appeared out of nowhere, pointing weakly at the hose in my hand. But this was agricultural water, not fit for drinking. I handed her my water bottle. Here, take this. I haven't used it today yet. As soon as she grabbed the bottle, she drank it eagerly, her throat gulping loudly. When she finally finished, she exhaled deeply and said, "Thank you so much." I realized I had no wallet or phone, and I've just been walking endlessly. I guess I must have collapsed here. Hearing that, I looked at her more closely. Her back and hair were covered in dirt. "You collapsed. This is serious. I'll call an ambulance." No. The moment I mentioned an ambulance, the woman's face tensed with fear. At that moment, I couldn't have imagined how drastically this encounter would change my life. My name is Tyler. I'm 36 years old and currently unemployed, though I help out with a family business. I live in a small town where my family runs a vegetable farm. After graduating college, I worked at an IT company in Boston for less than a year before leaving under certain circumstances. Since then, I've been assisting my parents on the farm. For example, this month, I've been watering the summer crops twice a week. Honestly, calling myself unemployed wouldn't be far from the truth. But with my parents away on a 3-day trip to a hot spring, I was tasked with watering the crops daily for the next few days. And it was during one of these watering sessions that I had an encounter that would change everything. That evening, as I finished watering, I paused to admire the western sky turning a soft orange. Helping out with a family farm meant I could occasionally enjoy the tranquility after a day's work. But just then, I heard a faint noise behind me, near the tomato vines. Something, or someone, was moving. I froze, thinking it might be a wild boar. Quickly, I planned my shortest route back to the house while cautiously turning around to look beyond the tomato trellis. What I saw wasn't a boar. It was a woman, sitting on the ground. Apparently, I hadn't noticed her, and had accidentally sprayed her with water. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there. Did you get wet? Are you okay?" She didn't respond, remaining dazed, but she was reacting, slowly turning her gaze toward me. Her lips moved, but only faint breaths came out, not words. After a few moments, I finally heard a raspy voice. Water, please, give me water." Her voice was weak yet desperate. She pointed at the hose in my hand, but it wasn't for drinking. I handed her my water bottle instead. "Here, take this. I haven't used it today yet." Although I hesitated to hand her my personal bottle, she didn't care. She grabbed it and immediately gulped down the water, her throat working with urgency. After finishing, she let out a big breath and said, "Thank you so much." I realized I had no wallet or phone, and I've just been wandering around. I think I must have collapsed here. Hearing that, I looked at her closely. Her back and hair were covered in dirt. "You collapsed. That's serious. I'll call an ambulance." No, the word came out sharply, her face tightening at the mention of an ambulance. "I'll be fine," she said, trying to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Instinctively, I reached out to steady her by the elbow. Even after she managed to get to her feet, she couldn't walk right away. As I supported her, I couldn't stay silent and asked how she lost her wallet, but she replied nervously, I'm really fine, really." She clearly didn't want to talk about it any further. Still, I couldn't leave a woman who had collapsed from dehydration, without a wallet or phone, out on the road, as it was getting dark. "Well, why don't you come to my house? It's just over there, if you're okay with it." She nodded weakly. "Thank you, I'm sorry for the trouble. I helped her walk to my house and prepared dinner. She ate heartily, enjoying the meal I made with vegetables my parents had grown. As we ate, we introduced ourselves. Her name was Kimberly. She was from Boston and worked in an office. She said she had come here to see a nearby scenic spot. Oh, you mean the famous site they use in crime dramas. It's about a 10-minute walk from here, but it's already dark. A sense of unease crept over me. It was now completely night, so dark. Kimberly glanced out the window and murmured in surprise, "Rural nights are so dark. It's so pitch black compared to Boston." I fought for a moment and suggested she stay in the living room overnight. This time, unlike earlier, she hesitated briefly, but clearly wasn't eager to go outside in the dark. "I'll be upstairs," I told her. I showed her where the bathroom and toilet were, pushed the table aside, and handed her a towel and blanket. Then I climbed the stairs, making noise with every step. I should mention I'm quite heavy. I'm nearly 6 feet tall, but my weight is far more noticeable. Especially around my stomach, I'm undeniably overweight. My parents and close friends often tease me, saying that for someone so big, I'm surprisingly timid. So when it comes to women, I never know how to interact with them. I've always believed they either find me scary or outright repulsive. The thought of Kimberly feeling that way about me made me retreat upstairs, avoiding her altogether. The next morning, she was gone. She left only a note thanking me. But instead of feeling relieved, I was overwhelmed by a sense of dread and foreboding. The nearby scenic spot she mentioned isn't just famous for its role in crime dramas. It's also a well-known cliff where people often come when they've lost all hope. I started running, but my heavy body refused to cooperate. For the first time in my life, I truly hated being this overweight. When I finally reached the viewpoint near the cliff, I saw her. Kimberly was sitting about 6.5 feet from the edge. I approached slowly, gasping for air. She was crying. In a weak, trembling voice, she explained that fear had frozen her, stopping her from taking another step closer to the edge. I sat down next to her. I was too out of breath to say anything. We sat in silence for a while before she began speaking again, her words punctuated by quiet sobs. "I work for a consulting company," she started. She told me she had joined a mid-sized consulting firm straight out of college. After successfully managing a client project, she earned recognition and was recruited by a larger firm. This year, I turned 30 and thought it was time to step up. They assigned me to a major project. She had been excited to be chosen and worked hard to prove herself. But nothing went right. I don't know what to do anymore. I overreached, and now I'm paying for it. It's all my fault. Piece by piece, her story unfolded. Kimberly had been assigned to a large-scale system development project. Every day, her boss, Mr. Moore, belittled her contributions. Her proposals were consistently rejected. The proposals that were supposed to be rejected were altered and implemented as Mr. Moore's ideas. Currently, the project is stagnating and on the brink of failure, and Mr. Moore is blaming Kimberly for it. Listening calmly to her story, it was clear Kimberly had no reason to feel responsible. Mr. Moore was an awful boss, and his power harassment was the source of her suffering. To others, this was obvious, but she couldn't see it. She believed she was at fault for being criticized by him. She thought that even though her ideas had been altered to be adopted, they were causing trouble for the project, so the responsibility must be hers. I could relate to her imbalanced psychological state. It reminded me of my own time as a corporate employee. Back then, I was also criticized daily by my manager. During that time, I desperately worked on a proposal for an internal competition. hoping to be acknowledged. My manager criticized my proposal and didn't even let me submit it, but then submitted it himself under his name and won an award. The day after that announcement, I couldn't bring myself to go back to the office. Now I can see how unreasonable my manager was, and I can think of several actions I could have taken. But back then, all I could think was that I had to escape, that I didn't belong there anymore. I left the company, but her suffering seemed far from over. As I listened, I realized a project stagnation might also have been caused by Mr. Moore's unauthorized changes. From an outsider's perspective, it's clear. Kimberly, you're not at fault. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self the same thing I fought. Back then, I blamed myself for the insults, the remarks about my weight, the rejection of my proposals, and even having my ideas stolen. Kimberly, too, was being pushed to her limits by power harassment, unable to think clearly. Am I not at fault? Kimberly asked, her voice filled with surprise. I nodded and repeated firmly, Kimberly, you are not at fault. I'm not at fault, she said softly. I watched as the life slowly returned to her expression. After that, we returned home and had breakfast. Bacon, scrambled eggs, a salad made with tomatoes from my parents' farm, and potatoes. Kimberly especially loved the tomatoes, praising their taste as she savored them. Thank you for the meal, she said with a smile, though her eyes glistened with tears. In that moment, her face was so stunningly beautiful that I found myself holding my breath. As she prepared to return to Boston, I advised her to gather evidence of the power harassment. It was essential to stand up to an unjust opponent. Thank you, Tyler. I feel like a completely different person from who I was just yesterday. Kimberly returned to Boston, but by then, my life had already begun to change. That day, when my parents returned from their trip, they looked at me curiously. Tyler, you look so refreshed, my mom said. Yeah, like you just came back from a spa, my dad added, both smiling warmly. The next day, when I told them I was heading to Boston, they weren't even surprised. They just said, good luck, and saw me off. When I arrived in Boston, I contacted my best friend from college, Eric. Eric had started an IT company during school and now had a solid standing in the industry. Hey, Tyler, finally decided to work for me, huh? He joked. Whenever we talked, Eric would invite me to join his company. Although I'd been developing and selling apps on my own since leaving my ID job, Eric was the only one who knew about it. Until now, I'd always laughed off his offers. But this time, I needed his help. I need your support, Eric. That day, I told him about my encounter with Kimberly, her situation, and my desire to help her. So, let me get this straight. You want to join that project system development team just to help a woman you've only met once? Eric asked, sounding both exasperated and amused. I thought you might know one of the outsourcing teams involved, I said, and maybe you could help me get a foot in the door. Well, I don't have enough pull to sneak you into another company's team, Eric replied. Hearing this, I was about to give up when he smirked and added, but you're in luck, Tyler. One of the outsourcing teams for that project happens to be my company. Eric's grin widened. Talk about a lucky coincidence. I even know Kimberly and that problematic boss of hers, Mr. Moore. I've noticed his behavior before. He's the kind of guy you'd want to avoid entirely. Honestly, I've been thinking about ways to address some of these workplace issues myself. I couldn't believe my luck. Eric hired me into his company, and I was immediately assigned to the team involved in her project. 2 weeks later, Kimberly and Mr. Moore came to visit our team. When Kimberly saw me already integrated with the team, she looked astonished. Tyler, I'm Tyler Reed. I joined the team 2 weeks ago. It's a pleasure to work with you." As I introduced myself, Mr. Moore wasted no time making a comment. "Mr. Reed, nice to meet you. Tall guy, huh? Quite the giant. Especially that belly, doesn't it get in the way of your desk work?" I smiled politely, but inside, I felt a small victory. The voice recorder I had running in my pocket had already captured some solid evidence. That evening, Eric invited Kimberly out for dinner, and I was included. However, Eric conveniently remembered a last-minute commitment, leaving just me and Kimberly to dine together. "This meal is delicious, but Tyler, your tomatoes were absolutely incredible," Kimberly said after tasting the tomatoes, as if she was reminiscing about that day. "Thank you so much for helping me back then," she added with a warm smile. Her gratitude made me feel a bit bashful. At the same time, I couldn't help but worry how would she react if she found out I had come to Boston just to help her. Despite my nervousness, dinner with Kimberly was thoroughly enjoyable. She seemed to be having a good time too. And before we parted ways, she saved my contact information and even agreed to meet again for dinner next week. The next day, it goes without saying that Eric teased me mercilessly. "You're welcome, Tyler. Thanks to me, you got to have dinner alone with her. Show some gratitude." Yay, thanks for everything, Eric," I replied, half joking but fully sincere. "Well, now that the reunion dinner went smoothly, next week we'll focus on taking down that power harasser," Eric said with a grin. By then, we had gathered plenty of evidence of Mr. Moore's power harassment. Kimberly's recordings and videos alone were sufficient, but we'd also added the remarks he made toward me. To ensure impact, Eric arranged for Douglas, the managing director of Mr. Moore's company, to attend the meeting. "Douglas was my senior in high school," Eric explained. "He's straightforward and won't tolerate harassment if he sees the evidence." The day we were fully prepared arrived, and it was clear that Mr. Moore hadn't expected to see his company's managing director, Douglas, at the outsourcing partner's office. Mr. Moore was visibly shaken, feeling uneasy about what might unfold. He reluctantly took the seat next to Douglas. As soon as the meeting began, I wasted no time and dove straight into the main issue. "Mr. Moore's treatment of his subordinates is blatant power harassment," I said. "It's unacceptable and creates a toxic work environment. We strongly urge action to improve this." I slid a prepared dossier across the table. "Improve the environment." It seemed Mr. Moore lost track of the argument halfway through. He repeated my words like a fool and reached for the documents on the table. But when he saw Douglas place his hand on them first, he quickly withdrew his own. Douglas scanned the materials, his face darkening as he read. "This, whatever is in these documents, it's all lies," Mr. Moore stammered, trying to dismiss the evidence. At that moment, I pressed the button on my voice recorder. The sound of Mr. Moore's snide remarks filled the meeting room. Douglas raised an eyebrow, clearly displeased, while Mr. Moore turned pale. Eric broke the silence, speaking calmly but firmly. "I apologize for interfering in someone else's business," he said, "but as you can see from the printed evidence, those remarks are just the tip of the iceberg." Douglas nodded gravely and said, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Eric. This is not something we can ignore. I'll make sure it's addressed properly. Starting now, you will be removed from this project, Mr. Moore." Mr. Moore slumped in his seat, defeated. True to Douglas's word, we never saw him again after that day. With the troublesome boss gone, Kimberly was appointed as the new project leader. She thrived in her role, tackling her expanded responsibilities with enthusiasm. The project, now free from its prior obstacles, progressed smoothly, A year and a half later, the outsourced program team I was part of disbanded. The system was handed over to the client's internal team for final adjustments. Her work had also reached its peak. She must have felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing the project would be a solid achievement on her record. Having fulfilled my purpose of helping Kimberly, I felt a mix of satisfaction and a tinge of sadness. The loneliness comes from realizing that I've lost my connection with Kimberly, and seeing her success makes it clear she doesn't need my help anymore. The confusion stems from the fact that even after I changed jobs, Kimberly still contacts me almost daily, and we still often have dinner together. When we were coworkers, it made sense. We were teammates, working toward the same goals and building a strong professional relationship. But now, even though we're no longer connected by work, we still meet for dinner almost every week and talk on the phone frequently. Our conversations used to include work-related topics, but now they're different. We talk about favorite foods, places we'd like to visit, and movies we've seen recently. And every time, we make plans for our next meeting. Why does Kimberly keep seeing me? Is it because I once saved her life, or because I helped her deal with that power-harassing boss? Could it be that she feels indebted to me? Sometimes, I feel like there's something more in her actions, but then I dismiss it as my imagination. One day, while I was out visiting clients with Eric, I caught a glimpse of myself in a shop window. I sighed heavily. "What's wrong?" Eric asked, and I answered honestly. "I mean, I'm still fat, aren't I?" Eric looked at me in shock. "Seriously? You've lost so much weight already?" It had been 2 years since I started working at Eric's company, and thanks to a regular routine, I'd managed to slim down. But realistically, I'd only gone from being super overweight to just regular overweight. Standing next to Kimberly, I still feel like I look out of place. "You know," Eric frowned at my muttering, "so that's why you haven't made any progress. Are you seriously letting that hold you back? Don't tell me you haven't even told her how you feel yet. I mean, someone like me doesn't suit her. Don't be ridiculous. Are you seriously going to give up without telling her how you feel, or even finding out how she feels?" Eric's expression turned serious as he started talking about the past. He admitted that he regretted not asking me to join his startup, especially when he heard I quit my job and moved back home. He was deeply frustrated. "You know, the company you got hired at back then was a rapidly growing one. I knew starting my own business would be tough, so I didn't want to drag you into it. But the truth is, I really wanted to do it together with you. When I heard you'd left your job, I regretted not reaching out to you sooner." This was the first time I had ever heard him say this. "Thanks, Eric, but I left that job because I wasn't strong enough. If anything, I'm the one who should apologize for deciding you were too busy and not even trying to talk to you about it back then." That was how I honestly felt, though I'd never told him before. Wait, does that mean? Exactly. Don't make the same mistake again. If you keep assuming what others feel without asking, you'll only regret it later. Even if she says no, you need to tell her how you feel and find out how she feels too. At that moment, we stopped in front of a famous jewelry store. "It's almost closing time. Let's call it a day here," Eric said, giving me a firm pat on the back before walking away. I somehow mustered the courage to step inside the high-end store. Looking at the display cases, I felt overwhelmed. Earrings seemed like too much, too soon. The price of a necklace made me worry it might feel like a burden. I couldn't figure out what to choose, and almost felt like giving up when I noticed a hair clip. Kimberly often wore her long hair pinned up with clips. I took a deep breath and called over a salesperson, and then the big day arrived. At the meeting spot, I stood there gripping the gift tightly, my hands trembling with nerves. The moment I saw Kimberly, my mind went blank, and I found myself holding out the gift. Kimberly, I like you. Kimberly looked surprised for a moment, but then her face lit up with a smile. Can I open it? I nodded, and Kimberly's slightly trembling fingers opened the box. A hair clip. It's adorable. Kimberly smiled brightly, but her smile quickly faded as she gave me a serious look. But Tyler, this kind of spending is unacceptable. I can't allow this sort of extravagance. I froze in confusion, and she continued with a determined expression. This is a problem, Tyler. Here's my proposal. I'll be your lifelong consultant. How does that sound? Consultant. Wait, what do you mean, exactly? Not just for finances. I'll make sure you stay healthy, too. I want you to live a long and happy life. Her words began to sink in. But could something like that even be possible? This is just a suggestion. But since you bought me this gift, I take it you don't hate being with me. Right, apparently, it was possible. In that case, I had something to say. Well, would you consider marrying me? I mean, as a, eventually. The words evaporated as soon as they left my mouth, leaving me stammering. But Kimberly answered immediately. Yes, I'll marry you. Wait, marry? Really? Yes, she nodded seriously, her expression calm but resolute. Why? The question slipped out of my mouth, completely inappropriate for the moment. Tears shimmered in her eyes. From the day we met in that field, I think I've liked you, Tyler. You're like a big teddy bear kind, humble, a little oblivious, and just comforting to be around. Honestly, I don't think you need to lose weight. But when I think about your age and health, it's something to be mindful of going forward. Kimberly said this while gesturing toward her watch. As we walked toward the restaurant we had reserved, our voices overlapped. I want to eat those vegetables from that field again. I want to let you eat those vegetables from that field again. We glanced at each other and laughed. I was just remembering the day we met. This time, our words completely aligned, spoken in perfect unison. It had been about 2 years since we met, just as I had wanted to be useful to Kimberly. She was now thinking of me in the same way. Gratitude and affection filled my heart to the brim. Later, as I watched Kimberly enjoying her meal with such joy, I made up my mind. I would propose to her properly. And when I did, I'd admit that I fell for her at first sight. I'd even confess that at first, I mistook her for a wild boar and was on guard. You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned? If you don't come, you're no longer family. It's common sense since you married my son, isn't it? That's what Effie, my mother-in-law, said to me, seeking agreement from Cody. I stopped Cody, who seemed like he wanted to say something, and agreed to her proposal. Goodness. Marrying someone so naive to the world is such a hassle. As long as you understand. If you don't come, it's divorce. I'll re-educate you from now on. I was sick of her ridiculous remarks. Little did I know, this would be the last trip with my in-laws. I'm Liliana, 32 years old. I run an app development company. It's still a small company, but I love my work, and every day is a joy. My husband, Cody, is 37, 5 years older than me, and works at a bank. Both of us are passionate about our work, and we can talk about it for hours, often until morning. Cody is very understanding of my work, and we share household chores. We love our work so much that, even after 4 years of marriage, we don't have kids. But we both like children and hope to have them someday. My family runs an auto parts factory. Founded by my dad, it's now run by my brother. Thanks to them, I had the freedom to pursue my dream of starting my app company. Even though our industries differ, I often consult with my brother and dad, who are also business owners. They are always supportive, making my family a huge pillar in my life. Cody's family runs a small factory. Being an only child, Cody was expected to take over. But he refused and chose banking instead. There were good reasons for this decision. Firstly, the factory wasn't doing well. And Fael Andy was actually considering closing the company with his generation. Honestly, running a small factory is tough nowadays. As a child, Cody often heard Andy talking with bank employees over the phone. Once, he met a very kind and cool banker during a visit to the factory and started accompanying Andy to the bank for meetings, just to meet him. Eventually, Cody aspired to be a banker, studied hard, and now works at a major bank. He studied hard for that dream and eventually joined a major bank, where he is now. Our marriage seems fine on the surface, but it's actually not going well. Effie doesn't think highly of my job. Since I can work remotely, there are days I work from home. She sees it as a frivolous job and doesn't understand it at all. I get it, for an older generation like our parents, my job is hard to grasp. It's not a physically demanding job, but it's still work, and it can be exhausting. I always adjust my work schedule around the in-laws' plans, so I never inconvenience them. I don't insist on them understanding, but it's frustrating when they think remote work is easy just because I have a flexible schedule. There are other things Effie disapproves of about us. We built our house when we got married, located about halfway between our parents' homes. Despite taking different routes, it takes less than 30 minutes to reach either house. As a dual-income couple, we manage our spending and savings separately. We value our independence and privacy, even as a couple. We contribute a fixed amount for living expenses every month, save the rest for the house, and manage our own money otherwise. Effie disapproves of this lifestyle too. She thinks it's wrong for a couple to talk about privacy. According to her, it's odd for family members to have secrets, and she doesn't consider them a true family. I think because Effie doesn't like me, she finds fault in everything I do. She adores her son Cody, so I'm just a nuisance to her. Every time we meet, she makes snide remarks about us not having children yet. It's something I'm sensitive about, and I'd rather not be reminded. Childbearing is a delicate topic, and usually it's polite to avoid it, but Effie brings it up every time, so I've started to avoid her. To not worry Cody, I've been staying late at work on purpose to avoid meeting her. Effie has done many other surprising things. But there was one incident I couldn't forgive. It happened on the day of my best friend's wedding. After her wedding, my friend was moving abroad. We wouldn't be able to meet as often since we both work. I was really looking forward to celebrating her big day. However, a week before the wedding, Andy came to me with a request. He had an important business reception and wanted me there. I naturally refused. The only thing more important than my friend's wedding would be a parent on their deathbed. That night, something unexpected happened. When I got home from work, my in-laws were at our house. As soon as she saw me, Effie confronted me angrily. "Liliana, what are you thinking? Refusing Andy's request is outrageous. You're my son's wife. It's only natural to prioritize family obligations. Your refusal is unacceptable. You need to rethink your priorities." She yelled at me. Cody was there too, but he said nothing. After asking, I found out the reception was critical for the future of the company. But to me, my best friend's wedding was just as important. I told Effie that. "I understand what you both are saying. But my best friend's wedding is an important event for me, and I don't want to miss it. Besides, I'm not even an employee of Andy's company. As I said this, even Cody chimed in. Can't you make an exception this time? This is really about the survival of the company. I'm going too, and it's a family effort. We can make it up to you for missing the wedding. It's a family crisis. Can't you help us? I was shocked. I never thought Cody would say such a thing. He knew how much I was looking forward to the wedding. And then Andy spoke. I understand Liliana's point, but this time, we really need your help. The atmosphere made it hard for me to refuse. It wasn't just any reception. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to skip my best friend's wedding. I told my friend the truth and explained why I couldn't come. Given that I had previously talked to my best friend about my family situation, she understood my predicament. In fact, she was more concerned about me. I'm fortunate to have such a kind friend. I felt guilty for missing her big day, but once the decision was made, I had to focus on making the reception a success. On the day of the event, Cody and I arrived at the venue early and tried to contact Effie. However, for some reason, Effie didn't answer her phone. As I worried about what to do, the in-laws finally arrived at the venue just 10 minutes before it was set to start. To my surprise, they were in a disheveled state, with messy hair and their suits and shirts all wrinkled. I was shocked and asked Effie, "What happened? What's with your shirt? Today is an important reception, right?" She awkwardly responded, "I just overslept." "Liliana, make sure you're not rude." I was so close to snapping back with, "I don't want to hear that from you." But somehow, I managed to hold back. I really want to give myself credit for keeping my composure. During the reception, Effie, not knowing how to converse properly, made a series of rude comments to our guests. It seemed she meant them as jokes, but their strained smiles made it clear they weren't received well. As expected, we didn't secure the contract, and the reception ended without success. I thought to myself that it was to be expected. If I had known it would be like this, I would have preferred to go to my best friend's wedding. I was infuriated at being dragged into such a disastrous reception, ruining my plans and causing issues with the in-laws. To my dismay, they didn't acknowledge any wrongdoing. According to them, after such a lavish reception with no contract, it's almost like dealing with con artists. Good thing we didn't make a deal with such strange people. I was speechless with astonishment. How can they be so blissfully unaware? After this incident, I became even more uncomfortable with my in-laws and started avoiding them. But unfortunately, there's something I can't avoid. Cody's family has a tradition of going on a family trip every year since his childhood, and it has continued even after we got married. Since our marriage, I've been expected to join these trips. But I'm always stuck with the chores and driving. Arranging hotels, booking meals, researching tourist spots, all these tedious tasks are my responsibility. And if I dare to voice my opinion, I'm immediately shut down with a "don't overstep." Even when we visit tourist spots, I'm often left to stay in the room, never getting to visit places I like. Honestly, I dread these annual family trips and always hope I might fall ill on the day. Now, this year's trip season has arrived. Despite their claims of being financially tight, my in-laws insist on a lavish trip. As usual, I was tasked with finding the hotel. I plan meticulously to keep Effie, who's always complaining, in a good mood. Since I'm the only one who doesn't drink, I'm the default driver, but I don't mind as it spares me from their conversations. However, a crisis occurred. Just before the trip, I received news that my mom had collapsed and was in critical condition. In such a situation, going on a trip, even a short one, was out of the question. I lost my composure, thinking I needed to see my mom as soon as possible. It was the day before the trip, but I decided to cancel and started preparing to go to the hospital. Cody offered to come to the hospital with me, but I refused. It felt like he was implying my mom wouldn't make it, which I didn't want to hear. When Cody and I went to tell Effie we couldn't join the trip, she exploded in anger. "You're saying you can't go on the trip I planned? If you don't come, you're no longer family. As my son's wife, it's common sense to prioritize the family trip, right?" "Right, Cody?" Effie said this, seeking agreement from Cody. Effie interrupted Cody, who looked like he wanted to say something, as if to say she wouldn't entertain any opposing opinions. In that situation, I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't find the words to speak. Nothing could be more important than being with my mom in her critical condition. Just as I was about to respond, my brother called. "It seems Mom's condition is serious, but a bit stable." I expressed my desire to rush to her, but he said visiting isn't possible right now due to a contagious disease outbreak. He mentioned that if she recovers, we could arrange a short visit later, so there was no point in coming immediately. Hearing this, I hesitated about what to do. Noticing my indecision, my brother asked what was wrong. I honestly explained the situation about the trip and my current dilemma. My brother, a bit angry, made a good suggestion. I hadn't thought of it in my distress, but the trip destination was near my parents' home. He assured me that I could quickly get to my family's house from the hotel if needed, and there shouldn't be any problem. Indeed, that's true. If I can't visit the hospital, staying at home or at the hotel doesn't make much difference. Accepting my brother's suggestion, I told Effie. "All right, I'll go on the trip." Effie responded, "Goodness. If you had said that from the start, I wouldn't have had to get angry. It's hard to marry someone so naive. As long as you understand. If you don't come, it's divorce. Honestly, I'll have to re-educate you from now on." Cody looked surprised, but we agreed to go on the condition that I could leave for the hospital if needed. Effie remarked, "It would be trouble if our driver suddenly disappeared, right?" "Oh, good. You're part of this family now, so our needs come first. Remember your role as my son's wife. This is a major event. The family trip should be your top priority." Her triumphant attitude and obvious excitement really irked me. But to avoid further trouble, I decided to endure it. On the day of the trip, I was so worried about Mom that I couldn't put down my phone, yet Effie was drinking beer from the morning. The back seat of my car, which I was driving, turned into a party scene. I was surprised to see Cody joining in the drinking. However, this was a trip for which everyone had rearranged their schedules. I told myself that it would be nice if everyone could enjoy the trip since we had all made the effort to come. During the trip, Effie's whims were relentless. Demands to stop for the bathroom immediately or to go to the grocery store for more alcohol. I felt like a servant. But I was prepared to endure such things. That's when my mobile phone rang. It was a call from my brother, thankfully informing me that Mom had survived. Her condition had stabilized, and she had regained consciousness. The diagnosis was subarachnoid hemorrhage. However, I couldn't be completely at ease yet. There were concerns about potential after effects. It was reassuring to have my brother keeping me updated, as I was feeling anxious. When I shared the news of Mom's recovery with my in-laws, Effie commented, "If she's better, there's no need to bother us with such news. You're making a big deal out of nothing." And then Andy added, "Exactly. No need to spoil our trip with such grim news. We're supposed to be enjoying ourselves." I was disgusted that Andy shared Effie's view and didn't want to think of these people as my family. During the trip, they made a ruckus in the hotel, drinking and partying, which was truly embarrassing. This incident deepened my distrust of my in-laws. Thankfully, Mom's condition remained stable, and there was no need to rush to the hospital, allowing us to complete the trip and return home. I was relieved. While I was sorting out the laundry, Effie came to our house. Wondering what it could be this time, she said, "You have a dryer at your house, right?" "We don't have one, so let me use it," and showed up with loads of laundry. I was exasperated and replied, "There's a laundromat with dryers. I have laundry of my own, and I'm using it right now, so it's not possible." To which she retorted, "Always so stingy. Once you're done, it's fine. I'll come to pick it up tomorrow. Leave it finished by then," and attempted to leave her laundry in our washroom. "Always so stingy. Once you're done, it's fine. I'll come to pick it up tomorrow. Leave it finished by then," and attempted to leave her laundry in our washroom. Cody stepped in. "Go to a laundromat. Liliana is tired, and she has work tomorrow." "It's not possible." Effie got angry, feeling her son was defending me. She left in a huff, spewing insults and slamming the door, leaving the laundry behind. In hindsight, if things had been different that day, maybe the course of events would have changed. Later, Effie returned and said, "During the trip, I realized something. Liliana, you lack the awareness of being married to Cody. We might face similar situations in the future. Since we couldn't discuss it, I've decided that Liliana should make a decision." She put a family contract and divorce papers on the table. I was speechless. What even is a family contract? It was ridiculous and confirmed my belief that she can't have a normal conversation. The saving grace was Cody's reaction. He said, "I have something to say. If you keep imposing your biased views on us, I'll cut ties. I can't deal with this anymore. What do you think Liliana is? She's not your servant or housekeeper. You're the one who's mistaken about your position." Effie was stunned. Until now, Cody had hardly ever opposed anything. It wasn't because he agreed with Effie's ideas, but rather he kept quiet to avoid the hassle. Following Cody's words, Effie's anger turned towards me. "You've changed Cody since marrying him. He used to be so sweet. It's crazy for him to talk to me like that. You must have brainwashed him. Turn him back to the old Cody," she accused, confronting me. She believed I had brainwashed Cody into defying her. Then, Cody spoke up for me. "The one doing the brainwashing is you, right? Always going on a rampage without listening to anyone's opinion. Frankly, you're a toxic parent. You never let me do what I wanted to do. After getting married, instead of calming down, you started spewing your venom at Liliana. Enough is enough. I'm not going to divorce, and if you have a problem, you should stay out of our lives," Cody said. Hearing this, Effie turned to Andy, who was with her, and burst into tears. Andy responded, "If that's what Cody thinks, then fine. We'll cut ties. Do whatever you want," and stormed out. I was surprised, but happy that Cody stood up for us like that. Feeling frustrated, I told my brother about this. He became furious. Saying he couldn't stay silent if they were acting this way, he decided to take action. It led to a tragedy in the in-laws' family. Turns out, my brother's company was a client of my in-laws' company. We had kept our family's company name a secret to avoid creating a power imbalance. The in-laws had no idea they were dealing with my family's company. But with things as they were, we couldn't continue like this. Though I had been patient, avoiding mixing business and personal matters, it had reached its limit. My brother had been having issues with them not meeting deadlines. You can't cherish those who don't cherish you. I discussed it with Cody before talking to the in-laws, and he agreed. Cody also said he had had enough. My brother ended the contract with the in-laws company. It was a business decision. They had been a problematic company, not paying on time and missing deadlines, but we had tolerated it because it was Cody's family's business. But there was no longer a need for that. Later, when my in-laws found out about this, they came to us in tears. Now they are constantly apologizing. They pleaded with my brother to reconsider the contract, but of course, that was impossible. It was their responsibility for not meeting deadlines. They should have been grateful for our patience. Cody explained everything to his parents, but they refused to accept it and ended up cutting ties in a rage. Cody wasn't sad, he felt relieved. He had been torn and tired, struggling between us and his family. Since then, we've been living peacefully. I learned that Cody had been supporting his family financially, but he stopped that now. The in-laws' factory went bankrupt. Even without this incident, it was on the brink of closure, drowning in debt. I heard that Cody had been paying for those annual trips, and it's astonishing how they could behave that way using someone else's money. Now, the in-laws are living modestly, and Effie has recently started working. I was honestly surprised to see her, who used to call herself a president's wife, working. One day, I saw Effie being scolded while doing a cleaning job. I felt bad for thinking this was karma. She'll learn the harsh realities of society and hopefully straighten up. As for us, work is going well. We haven't had children yet, but we enjoy our jobs and life is fulfilling. We are planning an overseas trip for our next vacation. For a while, we're thinking of enjoying life without children.